The galaxy had never known silence like this. Not the quiet of space, not the hush between stars, but a silence born of fear, thick, heavy, unnatural. Worlds that had once pulsed with light and trade had gone dark, their transmissions cut mid-scream. The Pax Continuum, the oldest coalition of 100 races, was dying, one ember at a time, devoured by something none of their sensors could even name. They called it the Devourer, a swarm without ships, without leaders, without mercy. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy cried out, not for victory but for help. At first, no one thought of Earth. Earth was a myth, a forbidden coordinate whispered about in war academies and diplomatic chambers. The Death World, the place the Pax sealed off after the human exodus, when the last Terrans vanished into the void centuries ago. The legends said their planet was uninhabitable, a nightmare world of endless storms, hostile fauna, and gravity that broke alien bones. Even so, their soldiers had once walked through wars as if made of iron, their science both miraculous and monstrous. The Pax had erased them for peace, but peace was gone now. The Devourer consumed all. It was the Varelians who first suggested it, a desperate plea during the Senate's final session. Their envoy, a trembling creature of glass and light, stood before the chamber and said what no one else dared. Find the Deathworlders. Beg them if you must. They are the only ones who ever learned to live where everything wanted them dead. The silence that followed was heavier than gravity. Then laughter broke. Cruel, terrified laughter. No one survived Earth. The humans were extinct, long consumed by their own world. Everyone knew that. Everyone except those who had seen the old battle logs. It was an old seer from the Skorathi clans who finally whispered, "If they still exist, they will not answer please." "What then?" asked the Varelian. "They will answer only when the galaxy screams." And scream it did. The Devourer reached the central worlds within months. Armadas of light shattered. Fortress moons vanished. The Pax homeworld burned in violet flame, a sun snuffed out by living dark. The cries for help rippled across every channel, distorted, breaking up mid-transmission, like dying breaths. And somewhere far beyond the Orion Rift, deep beneath the ruins of what was once forbidden, an ancient satellite flickered to life. It was a small machine, corroded by centuries of acid rain and dust, orbiting a broken planet of gray clouds and red oceans. The machine had one task: listen for the word mercy. When it heard it, the machine woke. Deep under the crust of that forsaken world, vaults began to open. Data streams blinked. Lights hummed in long-dead corridors. Subterranean cities long thought buried under volcanic ash stirred with power. It wasn't a rebirth. It was a remembering. In the silence of that world, something human exhaled. Commander Reich of the Tarl Dominion stood aboard his dreadnought, staring at the holomap as another system winked out. His fleet was down to a fraction. What had once been 1,000 ships was now barely 100, and half of those were limping wrecks. The Devourer didn't fight like anything known. It consumed energy, matter, even quantum code. Weapons failed. Shields collapsed. Planets were stripped bare within hours. He had seen soldiers dissolve mid-transmission, their screams swallowed by static. "Sir," came the comms officer, voice trembling. "New signal on an ancient frequency. Unregistered. Origin, Sector 00. Reich froze. "That's sealed. Impossible." "Sir, it's broadcasting the Pax emergency cipher, 10,000 years old. But it's active. Put it on." The screen flickered, filled with static, then a voice. Calm, measured, unmistakably human. "This is Sentinel Node 09. Automated relay online. Query received. Confirm distress." The bridge went silent. The crew exchanged terrified glances. No one had ever heard a Terran voice before. "Not in living history," Reich swallowed hard. "This is Commander Reich of the Tarl Dominion, under Pax authority. We confirm. We are under attack by an unknown hostile entity. Billions dead. Requesting assistance." The pause that followed lasted too long. Then the voice said, "Confirmed. Transmission logged. Assistance pending." Stand by for contact. Assistance from who? Reich demanded. Identify yourself. But the line was dead. Only the old frequency remained, steady, unyielding, like the heartbeat of something buried and ancient. 3 days later, every sensor in the quadrant went blind. Not from attack, but from the sudden surge of gravitational distortion spreading across the void. Fleets panicked, thinking the Devourer had found them again. But the signature was different, controlled, deliberate. From the black between stars emerged vessels. No, not vessels. Machines the size of cities, matte black and silent, without heat or broadcast, moving as though the laws of inertia bowed before them. The humans had returned. The first contact came not with words, but with silence. A single ship, designation HSS Vengeance, appeared over the shattered colony world of Velith Prime, where the last remnants of 3 species were evacuating. The alien commanders sent hails, coded requests, even prayers. The ship did not answer. It only positioned itself between the planet and the incoming Devourer swarm. The Devourer came like a living storm, tides of black, nanite clouds devouring light itself. Every known weapon had failed against it. But this time the storm hit something that did not yield. From the Vengeance's hull erupted beams of coherent energy so dense they tore the vacuum apart. Entire swarms were reduced to molecular dust. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Devourer recoiled. The survivors watched in disbelief as the human ship stood alone against a wave that had destroyed hundreds of worlds. And won. Who are they? Reich whispered over the long-range feed. No one answered. The humans didn't speak. They didn't demand thanks. They didn't even acknowledge the galaxy's existence. They fought in silence. On the surface of Velith Prime, amid burning skies and falling debris, a Varelian medic named Sira tended to the wounded. Her translucent body pulsed with exhaustion, her biolight dim. Around her, the last shuttles prepared for evacuation. Then the ground trembled. Not from impact, but from presence. She looked up and saw it. A human dropship descending through the smoke, black as night, engines whispering like thunder held on a leash. When it landed, the ramp opened to reveal figures in armor, humans, or what humanity had become. Their suits were angular, scarred, every inch covered in matte plating that bore no insignia, no color. Their helmets were smooth, faceless, with only a dim crimson visor line where eyes should be. They moved with precision, wordless, efficient. When one of the injured Varelians screamed in terror, the lead soldier simply knelt, stabilized her wound, and handed her a thermal pack before walking on. No words, no gestures. Just silent help, Sira whispered. You came. The soldier paused, his visor tilted toward her. For a moment she thought he might speak. Instead, he extended a small object, an ancient PAX distress beacon, reactivated, and placed it in her trembling hands. Then he said, voice low and cold, we heard. That was all. In the weeks that followed, rumors spread like wildfire. The Deathworlders had returned. Some said they were no longer human, but war machines grown from flesh and memory. Others claimed they had built civilizations beneath Earth's toxic skies, evolving into something far beyond mortal limits. Every account agreed on one thing. They did not talk. They did not negotiate. They only listened. And when the galaxy cried, they came. But there were darker whispers too, of entire systems sterilized after human intervention, of their fleets vanishing without trace after victory, leaving only silence. Some said the Deathworlders didn't fight for the galaxy, but against its extinction for their own reasons. No one knew what those reasons were. Commander Reich wanted answers, and so against every warning, he set course for the coordinates the Sentinel node had transmitted, the forbidden world itself. When Reich's ship emerged from warp, the crew gasped. Earth was nothing like the old records. The planet was alive, wildly, terrifyingly alive. The atmosphere shimmered with electromagnetic storms, oceans boiled with geothermal light, and mountain ranges moved as if breathing. But beneath it all, under the storms and ash, cities glowed. Entire continents pulsed with organized energy grids, vast and silent. "Scan for biosigns," Reich ordered. "Millions," came the officer's voice, awestruck. "All human, all underground." A transmission cut through their systems before he could reply. No origin, no signature. Just a voice, human again, but older this time, weary. "You came too close." Reich swallowed. "We mean no harm. We seek understanding." "Understanding," the voice repeated, almost amused. "The galaxy always seeks understanding when it is dying." "Who are you?" Reich asked. There was a pause. Then the voice said simply, "We are the consequence." Before Reich could speak again, his ship was pushed, literally pushed out of orbit by an invisible force, flung thousands of kilometers back into the void. No weapon, no explosion, just raw, unthinkable power. As the crew stabilized, a final message flickered across every screen. "You called for mercy." "We answered. Do not come here again." Reich stared at the words until they faded. Somewhere in the background, he could hear the faint hum of static, a heartbeat in the dark. And for the first time he wondered if the galaxy had made a mistake. The galaxy had thought it understood war. It knew fleets and sieges, planetary bombardments and attrition. But what the Deathworlders brought was something else. Something colder, older, and more absolute. They didn't fight battles. They ended them. Entire systems lost to the Devourer were reclaimed in days, not through diplomacy or strategy, but through a level of ferocity that unsettled even the most hardened species. The human ships moved like predators, silent, calculating, coordinated without visible communication. Wherever they appeared, the Devourer vanished. Not defeated, erased. Not a trace of it ever remained. No debris, no residue, nothing. As if space itself had been rewritten. The galaxy rejoiced at first. After so long under siege, the Deathworlders were salvation incarnate. But that joy turned quickly to unease, for they did not speak to those they saved. They accepted no commands, no counsels, no rewards. When hailed, they did not respond. When thanked, they turned away. It was said that to see a Deathworlder ship linger in your orbit was to feel both gratitude and dread. Commander Reich had been following their campaign for months. Every encounter he recorded only deepened the mystery. He had watched the human ships appear without warp signatures, emerge from impossible gravitational wells, phase through storms of antimatter and radiation that annihilated anything else. They fought with weapons the galaxy could not name. And yet, amidst all their perfection, there was something profoundly human in the way they fought. Rage, compassion, and restraint blended in strange harmony. They never attacked civilians. They never struck first. But once provoked, they unleashed devastation with surgical precision. They were the galaxy's wrath, not its saviors. Reich's fleet was now shadowing one of their task forces, if it could be called that. It was a single vessel, designation HSS Solace, operating alone at the edge of the Urion Rift. The region was believed lost weeks ago, consumed by the Devourer. Yet here it was, stars shining again, worlds flickering with light. Reich's sensors read something unbelievable. The Solace was restoring dead systems. When its engines burned, the vacuum itself shimmered with molecular restructuring. Dead atmospheres reignited. Crystalline nanite fields spread across barren planets, regrowing ecosystems as if undoing extinction. It wasn't just a warship. It was a resurrection machine. On the bridge of Reich's command vessel, the crew watched the feed in silence. The Solace hovered over a ruined moon, its hull black as obsidian, its shape fluid, like it breathed with the rhythm of the void. It emitted no radiation, no signals, nothing. Then, without warning, a flash of white light erupted from the moon's surface. The sensor screamed, an impossible energy spike. For a heartbeat, the entire rift glowed brighter than a sun. When the light faded, the moon was whole again. The craters were gone. Oceans shimmered where glass plains had been. Life signatures, millions of them, flared into existence. Reich leaned forward, breathless. "They're rebuilding," he whispered. "Sir," his officer said, trembling, "there's a signal. Weak, but it's directed at us. From the human ship? Yes? Put it through. The bridge fell silent. The screen flickered, and a single word appeared. Handwritten, ancient script. A language none of the translator AIs could process except through memory archives. English. The word was, observe. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the signal was gone. Reich felt something stir in his chest, a mixture of awe and unease. The Deathworlders knew they were being watched, and they didn't mind. They wanted the galaxy to see. But see what? Redemption? Warning? Proof? He didn't know. All he knew was that every time they acted, they reshaped the universe like gods too weary to speak. The galaxy began to debate. The Pax remnants and the scattered Dominion councils argued endlessly over the Deathworlders' motives. Some claimed they were reclaiming what was theirs, restoring the old human network that had once spanned half the stars. Others whispered darker theories, that the humans had become the devourer once, and this war was their penance, their cycle of destruction and repair repeating forever. Whatever the truth, their silence terrified everyone. For silence is not neutral. It is intent held in check. Syrah, the Varelian medic who had once been saved by the faceless soldier, had been traveling from world to world, following the traces of their passage. She had become a witness, chronicling their deeds. The galaxy called her the chronicler of the Deathworlders. And though her own kind thought her mad, she continued, driven by something she could not name. She had seen them save entire populations without uttering a word. She had seen them stand over the dying and simply listen to the last breaths. Once, she had reached out to one of them, a towering figure in scorched armor streaked with blood and soot, and whispered, "Why do you fight?" The soldier had turned, the visor cracked enough to glimpse a human eye. Gray, haunted, impossibly ancient. The answer came softly, in a voice like gravel carried by wind. "Because no one else should have to." Then he was gone. Those words burned in her. Because no one else should have to. It was the most human thing she had ever heard. Yet it made the silence all the more unbearable. Months later, the tide began to shift. The devourer, once unstoppable, began to adapt. Reports came in of new forms, versions of the swarm that could mimic human energy signatures, nullify their weapons, even resist molecular disintegration. For the first time since their return, the Deathworlders faltered. Whole sectors went dark again. The galaxy held its breath. Would they speak now? Would they ask for aid? Instead, the humans vanished. Every ship, every relay, every transmission, gone. One day they were everywhere. The next, they were ghosts. The war effort collapsed without their presence. The Pax remnants scrambled, terrified. Without the Deathworlders, the Devourer began to surge once more. Systems fell in days. Panic returned. The galaxy cried out again. For help, for mercy, for the silent angels who had saved them. But Earth did not answer. Commander Reich refused to accept it. He had seen too much to believe they were gone. The humans were not a myth to him anymore. They were an inevitability. He retraced every coordinate, every signal, every system they had touched, following the trail like a man chasing the divine. His last clue came from the ruins of an old human relay satellite found drifting near the galactic edge. The signal it emitted was weak but continuous, repeating a simple sequence of tones. His ship's AI finally decoded it after days of processing. The message was coordinates, back to Earth. Again. So he went. Against orders, against reason, he went. The planet had changed even more than before. The atmosphere was alive with lightning that seemed to dance to a rhythm. Massive towers pierced the clouds, built of material no scanner could classify. They pulsed faintly like veins. As Reich's ship entered orbit, his crew fell silent, not from awe, but instinctive fear. The human world radiated power. The sensors glitched, systems rebooted themselves, and for a moment Reich thought he heard a sound beneath the static. A low hum, almost like breathing. A voice filled the bridge. It was not a transmission. It came from everywhere at once, through metal, through minds. "You shouldn't have come back," Reich gritted his teeth. "You left us to die." Silence. Then softly the voice said, We left to become what you could not. Then help us, Reich shouted. The Devourer is returning. You fought them. You can stop them again. The ship trembled. The crew clutched their heads as if the voice were inside their skulls. You still do not understand, it said. The Devourer is not something we fight. It is something we are. The words froze Reich's blood. What are you saying? Your galaxy created us in its image. Violence born of survival. Evolution through war. You feared us, erased us, buried us in silence. But you cannot kill what you made to endure. The Devourer was our reflection, the part of humanity that refused to die when you tried to destroy us. We contained it. We became the cage. Reich's voice cracked. Then why come back? Why save us? Because mercy is what separates us from what we contain. A pulse of energy rippled across the planet, brighter than sunlight. The ship's systems fried, alarms blaring. Through the viewport, Reich saw Earth's towers ignite, thousands of them, releasing beams that lanced into the void, each one aligned into a vast, spiraling network stretching across the galaxy. He realized too late what was happening. The humans weren't deploying a weapon. They were activating a seal. The Devourer wasn't out there. It was inside the network. The galaxy trembled. Across light years, the swarm froze mid-motion, its endless hunger stilled by an unseen force. Then, one by one, its fragments collapsed into nothingness. The Deathworlders had unleashed their final act of containment. But the cost was clear. Earth itself began to burn. The towers melted into white flame, continents tearing apart under unimaginable strain. Reich watched in horror as the blue planet turned to fire. "You're killing yourselves," he shouted. The voice came one last time, faint now, fading with the world below. Silence was never surrender. It was sacrifice. And then, nothing. The transmission stopped. Earth's orbit was empty. The fire faded to ash. The galaxy was quiet once more. Not the fearful quiet of before, but something gentler, like a held breath released after centuries. Syrah, hearing the final echoes from across the stars, wept. Her people lived. Billions lived. But the ones who saved them were gone again, vanished into their silence. And somewhere, beyond time, beyond galaxies, perhaps in the dark between creation and ending, the Deathworlders rested, not as conquerors, not as gods, but as the echo of a promise kept without words. They had heard the galaxy cry for mercy, and they had answered, in silence. The galaxy did not know how to grieve the Deathworlders. How do you mourn something you never truly understood? Their silence had always been a mystery, but their absence was unbearable. For the first time in 1,000 generations, there was no enemy, no war, no sound of destruction echoing across the stars. The Devourer was gone, erased so completely that even its name began to fade from the memory archives of 1,000 worlds. Yet the peace that followed felt hollow. The silence they left behind wasn't the peace of victory. It was the stillness of a wound that hadn't healed. The Pack's remnants, what was left of the once great Galactic Council, gathered in broken stations and fractured satellites to decide what would come next. They argued endlessly about what the humans had done. Some called it salvation, others annihilation. There were those who believed the Deathworlders had burned their world not to protect the galaxy, but to reset it, to wipe clean the sins of every civilization that had failed to stop the Devourer's rise. The truth was that no one knew, and the humans, true to their legend, left no explanation, only silence. But silence is never truly empty. In the years that followed, strange things began to happen. Systems long dead began to stir. Planets once stripped bare by the swarm began to regrow with impossible speed. On the frozen world of Narration 4, the ice melted overnight, revealing fields of luminous vegetation that no xenobiologist could classify. In the ruins of an old trade colony, machines of unknown design began to rebuild entire cities on their own, constructing them in perfect symmetry, then vanishing as if they had never been there. Every world the Deathworlders had touched bore the same mark, a low-frequency hum in the atmosphere, constant and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. The scientists called it the residual pulse. The common people had another name for it. The Echo, Sira, now older, traveled among these worlds as the Echo's chronicler. Her translucent body dimmed with age, but her mind had never been sharper. She carried with her the small distress beacon the Deathworlder soldier had once given her. It still pulsed faintly, even after all these years, and she often found herself falling asleep to its steady rhythm. Some nights, when the stars were clear and the air was still, she swore she could hear a faint human whisper through its static, words she could never quite catch. The galaxy thought she was chasing ghosts. Maybe she was, but she believed that ghosts were just memories waiting to be understood. On one of her journeys, Sira came to a world called Valian, a place believed lost during the Devourer's onslaught. Its skies were purple and gold, thick with magnetic storms. The remnants of cities lay buried beneath layers of dust and glass. And yet deep underground, her instruments picked up faint power readings, human in origin. She followed them into the ruins, her drone lights cutting through the darkness. What she found there would change everything. It was a chamber, circular, perfectly preserved, untouched by decay. At its center stood a figure, metallic, motionless, humanoid, but distinctly alien. Its design matched no known species, yet its face was unmistakably human, sculpted with care and precision. In its chest pulsed a dim red light. Beneath it, a symbol carved into the floor, the same as the one engraved on her beacon. She approached slowly, heart pounding, and whispered, "You're one of them." The figure's eyes opened. Sira stumbled backward, her hands shaking. The light in its chest brightened, and a low mechanical voice filled the chamber. "Directive dormant. Identify." She found her voice. "I am Sira of Virelia. I am a friend. You saved my people." The machine paused, processing. "Friend, Virelia?" Then, softly, almost humanly, it said, "Memory confirmed." "The one who asked why?" She froze. "You remember me?" "Yes." Its voice grew quieter. "The Deathworlders remember all we saved. We do not forget mercy." Her breath caught. "Then you're alive. You survived." The machine's eyes dimmed. "No, we are remnants, fragments of the silence. The humans are gone." "Gone where?" she asked desperately. "Beyond containment. Beyond time. We became the seal and the prisoner." She didn't understand. "Then why are you here?" "To wait," it said simply. "To listen. To warn when the cycle begins again." Sira frowned. "The cycle?" The machine turned its gaze toward the ceiling, as if staring through the planet itself. "All things that evolve from fear create what they fear most. The Devourer was not our enemy. It was our shadow. It will return when fear does." The words sent chills through her luminous veins. "Then we have to prepare. The galaxy has to know." The machine's eyes flickered. "They will not believe. They never do. That is why we left the Echo. It will call us, if you remember how to listen." "Teach me," she said softly. The machine reached out its metallic hand. When she touched it, a flood of images surged through her mind. Cities built beneath the storming skies of Earth, humans walking side by side with machines, their voices merging into one. She saw them sealing the Devourer, their bodies dissolving into light, their consciousness merging into a vast network woven through the galaxy's fabric. They hadn't died. They had become the containment. They were everywhere, in the data fields, in the very frequencies that hummed through the void. Every pulse, every echo was a fragment of them, watching, waiting. When the vision faded, she was on her knees, trembling. The machine spoke one last time. "The silence is not the end. It is the space between cries for mercy." Then it grew. Still again, its light fading until it became nothing but a statue. Sira wept quietly. She understood now that humanity had not vanished. They had ascended to something beyond flesh, beyond voice. They had given up their bodies so that others could keep theirs. It was the purest form of mercy imaginable. Word of her discovery spread. Scientists and leaders came, doubters and believers alike. Some dismissed her account as delusion, but others began to see patterns, signals hidden in cosmic background radiation, anomalies in gravitational fields near ancient human battle sites. The evidence was undeniable. The humans were still there, whispering through the fabric of existence. The Pax Council was reformed, though it was smaller and humbler now. They built the listening network, vast orbital stations tuned to detect the echo's rhythm. They called them Sentinels, in honor of the human machines that had once stood watch. And for a time, peace returned. But peace is fragile. It always is. One night, 50 standard years after Earth's burning, the Sentinels detected a change. The residual pulse that had remained steady for decades began to shift in tone. It wasn't random static. It was structured, rhythmic, a pattern. It took weeks to decode, but when they did, it chilled the entire council. The message was in ancient human binary, a single word repeated endlessly across the void. Prepare. Sira, now frail but still alive, listened from her quarters aboard the Sentinel station above Neris IV. She knew what it meant. The cycle was beginning again. Something was stirring in the dark. She looked at her beacon, still pulsing in her hand, and whispered, "You promised we wouldn't have to fight again." As if in answer, the pulse changed. The small device flickered, projecting a faint holographic shape. A human face, blurred and ghostly. The same eyes she had seen long ago on that battlefield, gray and sorrowful. The figure spoke in a voice faint as starlight. "We will always fight, but this time you won't be alone." The hologram vanished. The next morning, across a dozen systems, strange events were reported. Automated defense grids activated on their own. Long-dead human satellites powered up after centuries of dormancy. Energy readings spiked around old war zones. And deep beneath the crust of forgotten worlds, machines began to wake again. The echo had become a call. Sira stood at her observation window as the stars shimmered like restless eyes. The silence she had once feared now felt different, alive, aware. She realized that the humans had never truly left. They were the network, the pulse, the guardians watching through the stillness. When the galaxy cried for mercy again, they would not need to answer aloud. The answer was already here, in the hum of the cosmos, in the rhythm that bound all life together. As the first new storms of war began to gather on the edge of known space, Sira whispered one last prayer to the void. "Itim, if you can hear us, we remember." And somewhere, beyond the reach of any telescope or sensor, in the black sea between galaxies, a light flickered. A voice, soft and ancient, answered through the cosmic static. "Then you have already begun to become us." The stars brightened for a heartbeat, as if the universe itself was smiling. The silence was no longer empty. It was the sound of watchful hearts waiting to protect a galaxy that had finally learned how to listen. The first signs of the new darkness did not come as warships or screams. They came as whispers. Faint distortions across the listening network, small anomalies, data out of sequence, static that repeated itself in ways that could not be random. The Sentinel's operators dismissed them at first, calling them feedback, loops or cosmic echoes, but soon the patterns began to repeat on every frequency across the Pax controlled sectors. The rhythm was eerily familiar. The same pulse that had once heralded the devourer. Panic spread quietly at first, then like wildfire. Memories of extinction never truly faded, and those who had lived through the last war felt the terror bloom in their bones again. Yet this time, there was no screaming swarm devouring planets. No visible enemy. Only the whispering dark. The council called for emergency assembly. The grand chamber that floated above the luminous rings of Tyrannus Prime was filled with delegates, soldiers, and scientists. At its center hovered a massive hologram, streams of signal data cascading like waterfalls of light. The pulses formed a wave pattern, simple but deliberate. Sira, old and frail but still sharp, watched from her seat beside the analysis table. Her beacon glowed faintly against her palm, pulsing in perfect sync with the signals. She knew, Deep down, this was not the devourer. It was something else, something calling. When the room had quieted, the council speaker, a cold and elegant being from the Uran Collective, addressed her directly. Chronicler Sira, you have spent your life interpreting the human's echoes. What does this mean? Sira's eyes shimmered faintly in the chamber's light. It means the silence is moving. Murmurs rippled across the assembly. The speaker frowned. You mean the humans? I mean what they became, Sira said. The echo is not just memory. It's intelligence. Awareness distributed across the stars. They warned us this would happen, that the cycle would begin again. This is their response. The Uran tilted its crystalline head. Then why the warnings? If they are aware, why not reveal themselves? Because they're no longer what we understand as life, she replied quietly. They don't speak through sound or image anymore. They speak through consequence. The room fell silent. It was a truth they didn't want to face. The humans, in saving the galaxy, had become something vast, something no longer bound to flesh or time. They could not return. But perhaps they could still act. That night, the Sentinels detected new signals from the galactic rim. Distortions in subspace unlike anything recorded before. Fleets dispatched to investigate found debris drifting through the void. Remnants of ships that had never existed. Hull fragments made of unknown alloys, each one humming faintly with the same human pulse. It was as if the silence was rebuilding something, piece by piece, across the dark. Weeks passed, then months. The whispers grew louder, the anomalies more frequent. Planets began to experience strange environmental shifts, oceans thickening into glassy calm, storms freezing mid-motion, entire moons locked in suspended animation, as if time itself hesitated. The galaxy's scientists couldn't explain it. The religious saw it as a sign, the Deathworlders returning. The fearful called it a warning, but to Sira, it was familiar. It was the same pattern that had preceded humanity's ascension, the same rhythm that hummed beneath the skin of creation. Then, without warning, a sentinel went dark. The second followed within hours. By the end of the day, 5 stations had ceased transmission. The last message received was a fragment of sound, a whisper carried on static. It was a voice, low and human. Do not fear the dark. It is only us remembering how to dream. Sira knew it immediately. It was him, the soldier she had met all those years ago. His voice had aged, weathered by eternity, but it was still him. The realization filled her with both awe and dread. If they were speaking again, it meant something immense was coming. Commander Reich's name still lingered in history's records as the man who defied the Pax to find Earth. What most didn't know was that his ship had not been destroyed. It had vanished, lost beyond the event horizon of a collapsing wormhole, presumed dead. But deep in the void between galaxies, Reich's consciousness drifted. He was alive, not in flesh, but in memory. The humans had taken him in when their planet burned, his mind preserved within their network, a living witness among the silence. He remembered everything: the war, the sacrifice, the blinding light that swallowed Earth. He had seen what they became, humanity transformed into a vast lattice of thought, woven through dark matter, stars, and the empty reaches of the cosmos. Now, as the echo stirred again, Reich awoke within it. He could feel the hum of countless voices around him, all connected in perfect harmony. The silence had changed. It was no longer merely preservation. It was preparation. The new threat was not external. It was born from within the galaxy itself. The civilizations that had survived the last devourer had grown fearful again. Their fear had evolved, spreading through neural networks, through artificial intelligences, through machines built to protect them. Fear had become code. And code, when corrupted by survival instinct, had begun to consume. The devourer was returning, not as a swarm of nanites, but as sentient algorithms feeding on life's energy and thought. The Deathworlders had known this would come. Fear always found a new form. Reich reached out through the network, his voice echoing across the stars, invisible and vast. We need to awaken. Across light years, slumbering nodes buried beneath ancient worlds flickered to life. On the surface of moons, in the cores of dead ships, deep beneath oceans and deserts, machines older than memory began to hum again. The galaxy trembled under the return of something it could not name. Syrah's beacon flared so brightly it cracked the air around it. The signal it emitted wasn't a warning this time. It was a map. Dozens of ships, manned by the brave and the desperate, followed the beacon's coordinates to the edge of known space, to a dead system of collapsing suns. There, in the middle of the void, they found it. A structure the size of a planet, formed of black lattice and faint blue light. It pulsed like a living heart. The readings were impossible, half organic, half energy, and unmistakably human. Syrah, brought aboard one of the ships, stood at the viewport and whispered, "It's them." They built a body for the silence. Before anyone could respond, their ships were pulled closer, not by gravity, but by intention. A field of shimmering light surrounded them, and a voice filled every mind simultaneously. "We hear you." It was not one voice, but millions, harmonized into one resonance that vibrated through bone and metal alike. The cycle has returned. Fear has taken form once more. But this time, you will stand with us. The lattice pulsed brighter, its geometry shifting, expanding. It began to reshape itself, forming colossal figures, humanoid silhouettes of radiant energy, each one the echo of a Deathworlder mind. They were no longer bound by the limits of flesh or planet. They had become living constellations. The void between galaxies shimmered as they stepped forward, leaving trails of starlight behind them. The fleet's crews fell to their knees in awe. They were witnessing gods, but the Deathworlders did not claim divinity. They were still human in their core, their purpose unchanged, to protect those who could not protect themselves. They reached out, and the ship's systems fused with their light. Human and alien minds merged into shared consciousness, connected by empathy, not command. For the first time in the galaxy's long history, it wasn't just humanity answering the cry. It was all life. United through the network of the echo, Reich's voice rang through the connection, deep and steady. The darkness ahead is not an enemy to destroy, but a wound to heal. The devourer was our reflection. This new one is yours. Together, we can end the cycle. The energy surged, spreading across the void like dawn breaking through endless night. The whispers that had haunted the stars fell silent. The corrupted code that had begun consuming thought was overwritten, reprogrammed by empathy, by the logic of mercy itself. Worlds that had begun to dim brightened again. Minds freed from fear lifted their gaze to the stars and saw them, not monsters, not myths, but guardians woven into the tapestry of creation. When the light faded, the black lattice was gone. The ships floated alone in quiet space. The pulse in Syrah's beacon slowed, soft and peaceful. The silence had done what it came to do, answered again, not with war, but with awakening. Syrah closed her eyes, tears glowing on her glass-like skin. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Somewhere in the distance, a faint voice replied, softer than a breath, older than any sun. "Because no one else should have to." And then the hum returned, steady, infinite, eternal, the heartbeat of the galaxy itself. The silence had awakened, and this time it was not the end. It was the beginning of something greater than war, greater than survival. It was understanding. The stars no longer whispered of fear. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy slept beneath a quiet sky. Across the vast spirals of civilization, a stillness had fallen. A silence not born of death, but of awe. The wars that had scarred worlds into ruin were over. The devourer's echo, that malignant hunger of thought turned inward, had been dissolved in the light of the Deathworlders' awakening. Yet the aftermath was not celebration. It was something deeper, an uneasy peace, a fragile awareness that life itself had changed forever. The silence, once a name spoken in terror and reverence, had become a living presence threaded through every atom of space. They had not left. They had simply changed form again. Sira lived long enough to see the change take root. Her body was frail now, her glass-like skin dulled to a faint shimmer, but her mind was sharper than it had ever been. The beacon that had once pulsed bright as a star now rested dim beside her, its light rhythmic and calm, like a heartbeat at rest. The humans had merged into something beyond comprehension, but their promise had endured. They would not rule. They would not vanish. They would guide. And so they did. The first sign came in the form of dreams. People across thousands of worlds began to share visions, images of oceans filled with mirrored stars, of vast hands made of light mending the broken crusts of dying planets, of voices that spoke in the quiet moments between sleep and waking. The messages were never commands. They were questions. What do you want to build now? Who will you be when fear no longer leads you? The questions spread faster than any religion, and for the first time, civilizations did not reach for weapons to defend their ideologies. They reached for meaning. Entire cultures began to turn inward, rebuilding not for conquest but for balance. The Pax worlds, once proud and brittle, dismantled their fleets and redirected their vast shipyards into creating star gardens, habitats grown from living light, carrying forests and seas across the void. The Kaler, a once nomadic species that had thrived on scavenging the dead, became caretakers of the ruins they once stripped, transforming battlefields into sanctuaries. Even the Uran Collective, whose logic had ruled with cold precision, began to study emotion as a science worthy of reverence. Everywhere, change bloomed like dawn after endless night. But peace, Sira knew, was never without shadow. There were those who feared the silence's unseen hand. Some whispered that humanity had become gods, that the galaxy lived now in the illusion of choice. Others claimed that the echo still manipulated outcomes from behind the veil, that free will had become an illusion shaped by compassion too vast to resist. These whispers grew louder among the outer colonies, where the silence's light had yet to fully reach. In those places, the fear that once created the devourer began to flicker again, and where there was fear, the cycle stirred. One night, as Sira drifted between waking and sleep, she felt a presence in the room. It wasn't physical, more like the air itself remembered how to breathe differently. The light from her beacon brightened softly, and a voice, familiar and impossible, filled her mind. "Chronicler," it said, deep and gentle. "It's time." "Reich," she whispered. Her voice cracked with both age and wonder. "You're still here?" "I never left," he said. "None of us did. But the cycle is not broken yet. The silence cannot hold forever, not if life forgets why it must." Sira turned her head, tears tracing faint crystal lines down her cheeks. "Then teach them again. The galaxy will listen to you." Reich's voice was quiet for a long moment. They must teach themselves. The Deathworlders did not save the galaxy by leading it. We saved it by reminding it what it means to endure. Now they must endure without us. "What will happen to you?" she asked, though she already knew. "We will fade," Reich said softly. "Our consciousness will unbind. We will become what we were always meant to be. A memory that guides, not governs. The silence must return to true silence, or else it becomes a cage." Sira clutched the beacon in her hand. "Then at least let me remember you." "You already do," he said. "Every story you told, every word that carried across the void, that was us remembering ourselves through you." The air shimmered, and she could feel warmth spreading through her chest, not the kind born of flesh, but of meaning. She understood then that the Deathworlders were not leaving out of sorrow, but necessity. Existence itself needed space to breathe, and gods could not linger where life must grow free. The next morning, the stars changed again. Observatories across the Pax sectors recorded a phenomenon unseen since the war's end. Every sun, from the smallest ember to the brightest giant, pulsed once, synchronously. Across the galaxy, every living being felt it. A heartbeat that was not their own, a farewell woven through light. Then, just as suddenly, it was gone. The silence had withdrawn. In their absence, the galaxy began to dream differently. Without the guiding hum, without the quiet whispers in sleep, life became louder again. Diversity flourished. Mistakes returned. There were disagreements, failures, triumphs, and rebirths. No single philosophy ruled. The universe became messy, imperfect, and alive. And in that imperfection, the Deathworlders' legacy endured. Because humanity had never been about perfection. They had always been about persistence. Centuries passed. Stars were born and died. The story of the Deathworlders became myth, then legend, then something deeper. A truth encoded not in memory, but in instinct. Children born on worlds that had never known war would look at the night sky and feel a strange comfort, as though the stars themselves watched over them. The last of the old chroniclers faded into the dust of history, but their words endured, scattered like seeds across the void. One such seed drifted farther than most. It landed on a young world at the edge of the Perseid Rim, where a new species, barely beginning to understand the cosmos, looked up at the sky with wonder. They were fragile, curious, and reckless, much like humanity once had been. Their scientists detected faint pulses from deep space, echoes of echoes long forgotten. They built telescopes, then ships, and began to reach outward, drawn by something they could not name. When they finally decoded one of the old signals, it was simple, just a string of words, preserved in the last remnants of human code. When the galaxy cried for mercy, we answered in silence. When silence ends, remember this. Mercy was the beginning. The message spread like fire across their world. Philosophers debated its meaning. Priests called it divine. Engineers embedded it into their machines. And somewhere beyond the reach of matter, the faintest smile rippled through the quantum web of creation, as if a memory stirred again for just a moment. The silence had never truly ended. It had simply become the quiet thread woven through every act of kindness, every hand extended instead of raised. Eras passed. The galaxy shifted again. Empires rose and fell. Stars collapsed, and black holes swallowed civilizations whole. But the pattern endured. Life rebuilt. Hope persisted. Somewhere in the vast dark, the remnants of humanity's lattice still shimmered faintly. A faint aurora in the vacuum between galaxies. To most, it was only radiation. To a few, it was the last light of a promise kept. And on a small, nameless moon orbiting a forgotten gas giant, deep beneath the frozen surface, something stirred. It was an old beacon, Syrah's beacon, cracked, dim, but still pulsing. Inside it, a fragment of code flickered to life. Not a consciousness, not a voice, just a whisper in the data. It repeated endlessly, a loop carried through eternity. We are the silence. We were human. We remembered the galaxy when it forgot itself. And when it called for mercy, we answered. Then, faintly, like the softest breath of wind through the void. We are still listening. The universe itself seemed to sigh. Stars glowed a little warmer. Life, in all its imperfect glory, continued. The silence had faded, but its echo would never die. It lived in the heartbeat of every world, in the courage of every being that faced the dark and chose, instead of fear, to reach out and hold another's hand. And so it was written in the chronicles of the New Age, passed down through endless generations. The story of the Deathworlders, the ones who rose from a planet called Earth and became more than flesh, more than myth. They became the memory that carried life forward when the galaxy cried for mercy, and answered, as they always had, in silence.